just plain wrong that middle-class Americans pay a higher share of their income in taxes than some millionaires and billionaires.
Now that the president last week pushing the so-called Buffett rule, which could have required millionaires to at least pay the same effective tax rate as the middle class in the 30 percentile. Now last night, Senate Republicans derailed the measure by a near party line vote, 51 to 45. Senators voted to keep the bill alive, but they did fall those 9 votes short of the 60 needed to continuing debating the measure. The anticlimactic output wasn't exactly a shocker in a vote that some say designed more to embarrass Republicans than to push the legislation into law. President Obama, you can bet, will continue to emphasize the issue on the campaign trail. Now, the cornerstone of the Buffett rule is the idea that millionaires ought to pay their fair share in taxes. In the wake of the controversy, a group of millionaires who are calling for higher taxation on themselves. They call themselves the Patriotic Millionaires, and we're pleased to be joined by one of those, Charlie Fink, the former president of AmericaGreeting.com and a senior executive for AOL. He's kind enough to join us via Skype from our nation's capital. Charlie, thanks for a few minutes.
Thanks, Rich.
As I said, not exactly a huge shocker last night in Washington, but do you think the exercise was still productive?
Well, I think we're trying to determine exactly what we can agree on. We apparently cannot agree that people who make $1 million a year should be subject to a 30% minimum tax. Many middle-class Americans are captured by the AMT, but apparently we don't want that to happen to the 2,000 Americans who make over $1 million a year.
Charlie, you're preaching to the choir here, but whenever we have this debate, I got a lot of folks around the table who say, Rich, by doing what you're trying to do, you're doing 2 things. Class warfare, and 2, you're killing the job creators. Why, if you didn't have to pay, regardless of carried interest, capital gains, whatever else, why, if you didn't have to write a check in the 30% neighborhood every year, why wouldn't you be stifled from creating more jobs?
Well, first of all, the idea that, or the meme that somehow taxes kill jobs is a lie. And it's been repeated over and over again by the right and by the Republicans, and it needs to be challenged because the truth is actually the opposite. At periods of relatively high taxation, say the 50s and the 60s, or even the 90s relative today, those were periods of tremendous expansion of the economy, and that was when, of course, I was fortunate enough to make my money. So I associate those quote-unquote job-killing taxes with expansion and prosperity, quite the opposite of the lies that have been perpetrated and, as I said, have gone unchallenged for too long. Taxes do not kill jobs. There is no evidence whatsoever that that is true. The opposite is true and is easily provable with facts.
You know, for me, and maybe you can articulate this a little bit better, I've never met a businessman who at the end of the day is going to make an investment even if there's a low taxation, if he or she doesn't think they're going to get a return on investment, and vice versa. I've never met somebody who wouldn't make an investment in a business if they thought they were going to make money on it. If the debate was how much that they'd get back, that might be mitigating, but at the end of the day, if they think they can make a lot of money on the investment, whatever their tax rate is going to be secondary to whether or not it'll be profitable.
That is so true, and I have to tell you, for the past 35 years, I've worked in companies large and small, and have considered how to expand, and also, sadly, at times, how to shrink. And it was always based on the amount of business we had. Taxes were never a consideration. It was always about demand for our products and services. If there was more demand, we hired more people. If demand fell off, we shrank.
Charlie, you know, a lot of folks, Grover Norquist, I'm sure one of your favorites, and a lot of folks even running for president now say, hey, if you guys want to write a check so bad, help yourself, just make it out to the U.S. Treasury, but don't come making everybody else here dig deep into their pockets. It's not the American way. What's your response?
Well, we hear that a lot from Republicans. It's quite glib and amusing, but the United States government is not a charity. And the metaphor I use is let's say that the American people are all in a lifeboat and 6 guys have oars. And we got a long way to go to reach safety. So 5 of the guys say, screw it, we'll never get there, it's too much work. But 1 guy puts his oar in the water. Now, how far are we going to get if the patriotic millionaires are the only ones putting their oar in the water? Everyone has to pull together. That is what our country is about. I don't like like it when my taxes aren't used for things that I like, but that's what happens when you're an American. And I'm okay with that. Now, people on the right think that somehow we should be able to selectively choose which parts of the government and which programs we would like our taxes spent on. But, those options are done in the context of elections, and we have a big one coming up. And I hope things like the debate over the quote-unquote Buffett rule, which again is a minimum tax for people who make over $1 million a year. So I think that's sort of the beginning of the debate of what can we agree on? Can we agree that any amount of money, can we agree that people who are that wealthy, the 2,000 most wealthiest people in the country, should pay a minimum of 30%, which their assistants and employees certainly do?
Hey, Charlie, last thing for me. Things have been pretty good in your tax bracket, haven't they, the last 10, 15 years?
Yeah, we've done okay.
All right. Hey, I admire what you guys are up to here, and I also appreciate a few minutes. I'm sure we're going to be talking quite a bit about this between now and November. Thanks again.
I think so, too. Thank you very much, Rich.
Bye-bye. All right. Joining us now to talk about Buffett and beyond, Dominic Carter, political journalist and author, and Tom Shalhoub, comedian and host of Funny Story on Sirius XM Satellite Radio. Tom, welcome. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I don't know how we make the Buffett rule funny, but we'll try. Dominic, we talked about this yesterday. It failed in the Senate. They knew it wasn't going to pass anyway. We're going to hear this thing getting banged and banged between now and November. 99, 1%, have-nots, paying their fair share in equity. Is this basically the storyline?
This is the storyline. It plays with the narrative of the Obama campaign. This is a message they're going to take from state to state to state. This is why Democrats are now able, Richard, to put places that they never had a chance in play, like Arizona, for example, with the increased Latino population there. President Obama, while the measure failed, he's going to take this message across America. He's going to say, listen, I'm only fighting for fairness. We're fighting for the good guys. They're fighting for the bad guys.
Tom, for the life of me, can you make any sense why Romney's not releasing his returns? Because this is kind of part and parcel with this debate here. He's the 14% guy, right? And people say, hey, I wish I paid 14%.
Well, he doesn't want him to see the money, right?
Right.
That's why he's not releasing
But he's going to have to before it's all said and done.
Yeah, but he's probably waiting for the right time. Maybe, I don't know, on a weekend when everyone's away, maybe 4th of July weekend. But he doesn't want him to see. We all know he's rich. He should just say it. That's what drives me crazy about Romney. He should, in the debates, I look at the TV and I just say, just turn to the guy and say, look, I'm rich. It's not going away. Get used to it. Yeah. You know? And I put my dog on the roof. Who cares? Just like, fess up.
Do you really?
Yeah. But remember when he did that? I mean, that was the bizarro rationalization here. But to me, though, this whole idea of you got to be careful, the class war thing. It's like, why do we all, people don't like the idea of estate taxes. Well, less than 1/10 of 1% are never going to have to pay them. But nobody likes it because in America, we all believe we're going to be millionaires. That's why we all play the lottery. That said, how does Obama thread the needle here where he says those SOBs, they're not paying their fair share without attacking prosperity?
Well, what he does is what he's doing now. President Obama is best when he is out on the road campaigning. There's no doubt about that, Richard. And he is going to, all he has to do in stump speech after stump speech, and we're already seeing it, he's going to say, I'm fighting for you in terms of Medicare, in terms of Medicaid. And then when Romney slips and puts his foot in his mouth when he talks about cutting HUD and the Department of Education, that plays right into Obama's message. But I hasten to point this out here. Don't write anything off because, look, I know there are competing polls, but one poll out just yesterday showed Romney up, 47, 45?
Don't be jumping the gun on me. I'm getting those numbers a little bit here. But even if he outsources, because Romney's too smart to say it himself, but if whether it's on right-wing radio or whatever, if they're going to be throwing out lines like socialist, wealth distribution, et cetera, for Obama, does that have any chance of sticking with that undecided independent voter out there who can't figure out, who ought to be paying more, who ought to be paying less, and how more people get to work?
He's got to think of a new word, I think. These terms, you gave me an idea because you just said the estate tax. But do you remember Bush started calling it the death tax?
Absolutely.
So then you hear death, you hear estate tax, you say, get those rich people. But then the death tax, you're thinking like, yeah, I want to be able to leave some money to my kids. So if you change it, maybe the Buffett rule, that's a good term for Democrats because Buffett is a kindly old grandfather. Yeah. So we got to think of a new term for it. I don't know. We'll work on that.
We got a commercial break to do it. Now, when we come back after the break here, are voters more skeptical of a second-term Obama or Etch-a-Sketch Mitt? Remember the open mic that caught Obama talking to the Russian premier saying, trust me, we'll take care of it next term? I got a lot of people excited. And the whole Etch-a-Sketch moment certainly got people wondering, who is the real Romney? We'll talk about it in Real Politics right after this.